Dark Spider David here, and today we're going to be tackling the Dark Knight Returns figures from McFarlane Toys. Now, little bit of a disclosure, I will not be covering Batman in this video because I've actually already given him his own separate review on the channel. So if you guys want to check that out, you can find it on this channel. For now, we're going to be tackling the Carrie Kelly Robin, Joker, and Superman respectively, as well as the Build-A-Figure horse that you can actually put together utilizing the pieces that come with every single one of these figures. And it's also my first Build-A-Figure that I'm going to be tackling on the channel, so pretty exciting stuff. First off, I want to cover a little bit of the basics. So obviously these are McFarlane Toys figures, so they're going to be scaled at the 7-inch measurement. However, what I find kind of curious is that they really are truly to scale, in the sense that Joker is frankly the only one I feel matches the 7-inch height, whereas Superman is a beefy son of a bitch, pretty much measuring at a full 8 inches due to his brawny composure and scale and physique, whereas the Carrie Kelly Robin is obviously going to be the shortest, probably just stemming a little over 5 inches. All three have the traditional 22 points of articulation. However, I feel like Robin is the only one that is able to fit the bill of having probably the best articulation, ironically, considering her stature, because she's the one that has probably the most fluid ball joint that allows the head to rotate 360 degrees as well as pivot up and down and side to side, but it feels fluid, it feels comfortable. She's got the joints at the shoulders that allow it to fully extend to the sides, as well as vertically rotate 360 degrees, as well as a bicep swivel that allows it to move all the way around. 2 elbow joints, the wrist joints, as well as top leg joints that allow the legs to move up and down, 2 joints at the knees, and then the traditional ankle joints that allow the foot to rotate horizontally as well as pivot upwards and downwards. The only thing that she's missing is a little bit of an ab crunch, only because of how restrictive that torso piece, that little tunic that she's got going on, it kind of wraps around the middle portion of the body. But overall, her articulation is actually very flexible and free-flowing. The most that I can say for all three of these figures, because the other two, the boys, are a little bit more on the restrictive side. They have the respective articulation, however, there are some compromises. Like, for example, with Superman, he's not going to have any kind of bicep swivels. The swivels themselves are actually hidden inside of the elbows, similar to that of the Dark Knight himself, Batman, where the joint is then decided to be hidden inside of the elbow, and then a hinge joint that allows the elbow to bend at a 90-degree angle, but not fully bend all the way upwards like your traditional McFarlane. Everything else follows suit, such as the ab crunch and the torso rotation. He does have actually waist articulation, so that's actually pretty dope that he's able to rotate 360 degrees at the waist, as well as being able to move the legs upwards and downwards, rotate the arms all the way around, as well as being able to extend them, and very flexible butterfly joints that allow him to give him the shrugging motion. It's once we get to, like I said, the feet that feel a little bit on the restrictive side, a little bit on the ratcheted part with the joints there that make it just a bit of a resistance to be able to flexibly bend the ankles in any kind of direction. But a lot of his articulation is actually pretty generous and pretty good. Joker himself, however, is probably the one that's a bit more on the restrictive side, because not only is his neck articulation a little bit on the stiff side that gives me a little bit of resistance when turning his head from left to right, but he's pretty much missing the butterfly joints. You can't really flex his shoulders in any kind of direction, you can only rotate them. But the way that his coat is kind of designed, being able to move the arms upwards and downwards starts to get a little tight, considering how much that rubber piece that makes up his suit, makes up his coat rather, is pretty much just kind of grasping onto that joint overall, that you start to hear a little bit of that squeaking noise when moving the limb from either direction. Fortunately, unlike Superman, he does have the two joints at the elbows that allow him to bend the arm all the way upwards at that point of the arm, as well as wrist articulation on that ball joint there. Unfortunately, because of the way that his suit is designed, no real way to kind of crunch the abs in any kind of direction. You can kind of feel a little bit of flexibility of movement, but obviously the suit is going to make sure that you really cannot take full advantage of that. You are able to rotate the waist all the way around, however, and he does have ball joints at the top of the legs that allow his legs to be able to move upwards and downwards. However, that thing they did with both Batman and Superman's elbows, where they hid away the swivel inside of the elbow, they pretty much kind of did a similar thing here with Joker's knees, where he's able to bend the knee at a 90-degree angle. However, he's not really able to fully bend it all the way up because he's only given one joint. The other joint is actually hidden inside of his knee that allows it to rotate 300, well, maybe not 360 degrees, but from side to side. So it's kind of similar to that hidden bicep swivel on the elbow, except this time they did it with his knee. And then the ankles are not exactly on the most reliable side because of the way that his shoes are designed. So you are able to rotate the ankles 360 degrees. However, flexing them upwards and downwards feel a little bit on the kind of diagonal side that just doesn't feel all that comfortable. McFarlane made sure to throw in some accessories with the three figures. Superman comes with an extra pair of open hands. Carrie Kelly's Robin comes with her signature slingshot, although I don't know how I feel about the quality with the rubberiness of the handle, but overall it kind of does the job of kind of setting the stage for her weapon of choice. It's once we get to the Joker that we get a little bit on the laughable side. He comes with an extra hand that is able to replace the fisted hand he comes with, so that he then has two open hands. However, he also comes with a dagger, or his signature knife, that he also utilizes in the graphic novel itself. And much like Carrie Kelly's slingshot, it's made out of that rubbery kind of material, but it's made just too much on the thicker side that it just comes off as just a little bit goofy in terms of representation. But aside from the traditional stuff that you would expect from McFarlane Toys to throw in with their figures, there's just something kind of unique about the way that they were able to tackle the Dark Knight Returns property here, because they really did a pretty decent job of replicating the signature Frank Miller style as far as characterization and aesthetic, that I would probably say that this is probably one of the few waves from McFarlane Toys and DC Multiverse that stands out from your archetypal McFarlane with the traditional chains and gothic nature and pointy bits. So because of that, it's able to just stand out as its own separate wave. Now, of course, there's going to be variances as far as quality and what exactly how each one kind of compares to each other. Superman, for example, he's meant to be the beefier of the bunch, so the musculature and the sculpting is actually pretty good. The way that McFarlane was able to lift that Frank Miller style, it's definitely represented here. I just feel like, I don't know what it is, but there's something about the quality of the plastic itself or the texturing that just comes off as a little fishy pricey. As far as, just like I said, the way that the plastic just feels in hand. Sculpting is rather well, and I really love the scaling, especially because, like I mentioned before, this is the tallest of the bunch. He's about 8 inches tall, and the face is able to translate very, very well from the graphic novel. Like I said, he's got the much more brawny jaw and the curly hair and all that stuff, and the Superman symbol on his chest, as well as, like I said, his overall look just looks really, really good. But actually feeling him in hand is where it gets on that Fisher-Pricey level of quality with the plastic. I don't know if it's maybe because I had to outsource him somehow. I don't know what the backstory is there, but he looks better than he feels, if that makes any kind of sense. Plus, I gotta be honest, this is one shitty cape. Pulling him right out of the box, they did a similar thing that they did with Batman, where at the bottom you have some legitimate creases in the rubber, but once you get to the top, not only does it get really, really thin and flimsy, especially with the way that it kind of curves right here on his right side, but also the way that it all feels just kind of plastered down there towards the top. It feels more, like I said, like I said with the Batman figure, like a representation or a caricature of a cape rather than an actually fully made cape for the figure itself. And though I really respected her articulation being probably the most faithful amongst the McFarlane line, I would probably say Robin is gonna be my least favorite, not only because she is the smallest as far as the scale, but also because being that she's gonna be the smallest, she's gonna have a few more compromises as far as detail and sculpting. Now, I really dig the outfit itself. I like the R there on her chest. That's very, like I said, kind of emblematic of the way that she's represented in the Frank Miller graphic novel. And I really like the sculpting going on with her hair. That's very representative of the way she has it in that comic book. But unfortunately, it also ends up being a bit of a curse on the figure because her hair was molded to be a little bit too big, too fluffy, that it actually presses down on the glasses that she has on her face, and because of that, it comes off as kind of slumping over her face and never really looking all that right. In fact, that it comes across as a little bit goofy, and then on top of that, it's hiding an awful lot of face detail, particularly her eyes, which I can kind of see are fully painted out and really well detailed, but unfortunately, the glasses as well as the hair are completely obscuring that it almost really doesn't matter that they would have given her full-on decked out, painted out eyes. Apart from that, she also suffers a similar thing that I've always criticized very small, very delicate figures like Ace Age Figuarts or Mafex, where she's just a little too small that I feel like, because of my fingers, I'm just gonna mishandle her in a way. Pause. I'm gonna mishandle the figure in a way that I will risk it breaking, especially around the arms area. I appreciate the amount of articulation they gave her, but whenever I move the arms around or bend the elbows, I feel like I'm gonna be breaking the figure because of how much thinner the plastic is on her versus other traditional McFarlanes. Now, thankfully, the legs feel a little bit more on the respective side, and I appreciate that they managed to get the color temperature on her skin quite right, and I really dig the molding of the shoes. They went with those Peter Pan shoes that she has in the comic book, but apart from that, there's not really a whole lot going on right here to make her stand out amongst the other two. Which means that arguably, Joker is probably going to be my favorite, despite having a limited nature with his articulation, kind of making him a little bit statuesque. The detail, though, is actually really, really cool. I really like the face sculpt with the smiling grimace there. I kind of wish that they would have thrown in an extra head with his relaxed, much more pouty face that he's got going on throughout that comic book, but at least they were able to get an awful lot of the details right, specifically, like I said, around his smile, his eyes, although they're a little bit on the squinty side that I would have liked to have gotten a little bit more of the eyes coming through, but the paint applications and the etchings for his hair are really, really awesome. The suit itself, however, is awfully clean. I really like how the tie is kind of motioned in a way where it looks like it's kind of blowing in the wind with the purple shirt underneath, but then the texturing going along with his suit jacket comes across really, really well. It's got like this matted feel to it that feels really great in hand. And then when we move on to the pants, they're made out of a different kind of beigeier white, but it feels really good in hand and comes across really well on camera, that I'm able to forgive a little bit of the misgivings with the articulation, plus everything else that is presented here as far as the articulation, especially the hinges they utilized for the elbows, just feels really, really good in hand, and being able to move it all the way around, that he himself is able to come across very well. He, much like the Joker in almost every kind of iteration of the character, this figure has a bit of a presence to him. But whether you're a figure or McFarlane Toys collector or not, you're not really going to get any of these guys individually. You got to get them together, and if there's one figure you're going to get individually, it's going to be probably Batman, because he is the Dark Knight in Dark Knight Returns. And knowing this kind of mindset, McFarlane decided to make it into a build-a-figure line. So all 4 figures come with a piece to build the horse. Yes, out of all the things in that graphic novel, they went with Batman's horse, because I guess that Batmobile tank son of a bitch is probably a little bit too big on the production side of things, so they opted for his trusty steed. And each figure comes with the individual pieces. Batman came with the tail and the 2 front legs. Robin came with 2 halves of the middle body piece. Superman came with the 2 hind legs, and then the Joker came with the saddle and the head. And assembly of the pieces themselves is pretty straightforward. In fact, it's so straightforward that they put the instructions on the back of the box, and you're pretty much able to piece it together yourself from that point forward. I will probably just say it gets a little finicky when trying to assemble the 2 halves with the head, is where you have to play a little bit with physics, because often it had a tendency to kind of slip off and not accurately kind of clasp onto the 2 pieces as well as the head itself. But once you're able to maneuver the pieces around, you're able to get along just fine. And from that point forward, it gets a little easier and straightforward. Slipping the saddle is a little scary because the bottom strap feels like it's a little too tight, but once you wiggle it across through, it slips on and rather tightly and comfortably. And then everything else is pretty much par for the course, fitting the 2 hind legs, the tail, and then the 2 front legs, which did give me a little bit of trouble only because slotting them in kind of pops into place, but it never really fully feels like it's in there all the way. And I thought to myself, maybe I'm putting them in wrong, but it turns out that they are in the right spot, because when I swapped them, I got even harsher resistance. And because of that, I was like, all right, that's definitely not the way to put the front 2 legs. So I'm going to go ahead and put them in the original spot. And another reason why is because they just don't look right, which is arguably the perfect segue into how I feel about the overall Build-A-Figure for Batman's horse here, which is that for the most part, he overall looks pretty decent and presentable. He just reminds me an awful lot of that meme that goes around where it shows like half of the horse drawn beautifully and then the rest of the horse just looks kind of terrible, or in the opposite side of the spectrum of immaculate. This kind of reminds me of that meme where the top half of the horse looks awesome with the saddle, the amount of detail they put into that saddle, especially with the little Batman symbol that's etched right there in the middle, as well as the actual sculpting and detail of the horse head itself looks rather great, and the way that they were able to paint out and etch out the hair on his mane works really well, especially in person versus pictures. But once you get to the legs is where we get just a little bit on the disproportionate side. I don't know what it is, but there's something about these front 2 legs that just look off to me. And like I said, I keep thinking to myself that I might have slotted them in wrong, but it turns out that that's exactly how they're supposed to be. Now, there is a decent amount of articulation actually going along with the animal itself here. You actually have an articulated tail that's able to rotate as well as move upwards and downwards. The hind legs are able to move up and down on the slot there towards the back, as well as knee joints on pretty much all 4 legs that are able to move up and down, as well as ball joints that are able to rotate and move about the hooves in place for decent positioning, as well as the head that's able to not only rotate from side to side along the bottom part of the head, but then towards the bottom part of the neck has a slot that's able to move up and down via the little ratchety slot that he's got built inside of those 2 half pieces. So by himself, he's a pretty decent Build-A-Figure, and for being my first Build-A-Figure, he's not too bad. I just feel that there's probably better ones on the horizon. Now, once you mount the Dark Knight himself on top, he definitely has an added quality to him. It's not the best. Batman doesn't really sit on him rather well. I mean, it does a good job of fitting in the feet into the little spurs that he's got going along here on the side of the saddle. But in terms of actually having a good amount of balance, positioning Batman on top of him, especially with the way that Batman has the thigh cuts amongst his legs that allow this to be possible, it's not exactly the best fit. Plus, the actual strap here that he is able to use to steer the horse doesn't really fit too well into his hands either, so there's a little bit of finessing and caveats to him. But aside from that, actually mounting Batman on top of him definitely adds a level of quality and presence to the horse that completes the entire ensemble, and then putting the other respective Dark Knight Returns figures along the side, and more on top of that, putting Superman on one of those floaty flight bases as opposed to the traditional black base that he comes with, definitely completes the overall image. And that's pretty much the Batman Dark Knight Returns wave from McFarlane Toys. I pretty much enjoyed it for the most part. Arguably, Batman is going to be my favorite only because it's probably the most unique that McFarlane has ever been with a Batman DC Multiverse figure, because of the way that it's sculpted and detailed and kind of sets itself apart from the traditional as I like to call it, McFarlaneisms. As far as the rest of the wave, as well as the Build-A-Figure pieces to make Batman's horse, I would say if you're a completist, definitely pick them up, and if you want to kind of percolate the entire ensemble, it definitely looks great up on the shelf. I just don't think that it's necessarily a mandatory thing, especially if you're just prioritizing the Batman. If you just want to collect a singular figure and not really worry about building the rest, then that's okay. But you are going to have varying degrees of quality as far as sculpting and detail and articulation with the remaining 3, but they are still very much worth your while, especially if, like I said, you have the money, the space, and the desire to collect the rest of the wave. If you guys enjoyed the video, thumbs up, or if you didn't, thumbs down below. If you guys want to stay tuned for some more McFarlane Toy reviews as well as other Spider-Man and Batman related content, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. And according to YouTube, the video now showing up on screen is the next one that you should watch, so you should definitely check that out. Otherwise, stay humble, and I'll see you guys on the next video.